Growth hormone moves in pulses. Across a normal day, there are several of them, brief and fairly small, but the largest one in most healthy adults doesn't arrive while you're awake. It arrives in the first stretch of deep sleep, usually within the first hour after you fall asleep. And for a lot of people, that single nighttime pulse accounts for the majority of the growth hormone their body releases across the entire 24-hour cycle. That's the part of a lean bulk almost nobody plans around. You can read everything there is to read about how to lean bulk, get your numbers exactly right, train with real intent, and still leave most of the returns sitting on the table every night, because the window where your body actually acts on all that work is a window you were never taught to manage. The way most people think about building muscle is that it happens in two places. It happens in the kitchen, where you eat the surplus, and it happens in the gym, where you earn the stimulus. Both of those are true, and both of them are only setup. When you eat in a caloric surplus, what you're really doing is making raw material available. That's all a surplus is, underneath the macros and the meal timing and everything else. Caloric surplus explained in one sentence is just this: more energy and more building blocks coming in than going out. So the body has something to build with. And when you run a hypertrophy workout routine, progressively loading the muscle week over week, what you're creating is a signal, a demand, a message that says this tissue needs to be bigger and stronger than it currently is. But the material and the signal don't assemble themselves during the day. The assembly is heavily weighted toward the night, and it's weighted toward a specific stage of the night that has a name most lifters have never thought about in the context of their physique. Slow wave sleep, the deep stage. On a sleep study, it shows up as large, slow delta waves, which is where the name comes from, and it dominates the early part of the night. Your first and second sleep cycles carry the most of it, and as the night goes on, the amount of slow wave sleep in each cycle shrinks while dreaming sleep takes over toward morning. This matters for one simple reason. The growth hormone pulse is locked to the onset of that first deep stage. When the deep stage is intact and arrives on schedule, the pulse is large. When the deep stage is fragmented, delayed, or cut short, the pulse is blunted, and there is no second chance later in the night to make up the full difference. So the question of how much of your bulk you actually convert into tissue isn't decided only by what's on your plate or what's on the bar. A real part of it is decided by whether your body successfully reaches and holds that first block of deep sleep. This is what slow wave sleep hypertrophy optimization actually refers to. Not a supplement, not a gadget. The deliberate protection of the one stage of sleep that does the most anabolic work, so that the growth hormone release and everything downstream of it runs at full strength instead of half. Growth hormone itself is part of the story, not all of it. It drives the release of insulin-like growth factor. It shifts the body toward using fat for fuel overnight while protecting lean tissue. And it supports the repair processes that turn a trained fed muscle into a slightly larger one by morning. The whole cascade keys off that early deep sleep pulse, which means the lifter who reaches deep sleep cleanly and the lifter who doesn't can eat the identical surplus, run the identical program, and walk away with different bodies over a year. Same inputs, different execution. Here's where it gets uncomfortable for most people, because the things that wreck slow wave sleep are ordinary, and a lot of them are things lifters do on purpose. Alcohol is the clearest one. A few drinks in the evening will often help you fall asleep faster, which is why people believe it helps them sleep. What it actually does is suppress slow wave sleep in the first half of the night, exactly when the growth hormone pulse is supposed to fire, and then fragment the back half as it clears your system. The night feels like sleep. Physiologically, the most valuable stage of it has been hollowed out. For someone running a bulk, a regular evening drink isn't a neutral habit. It's a direct tax on the pulse. Caffeine is quieter about it. The problem isn't only the coffee at night, it's that caffeine has a long half-life, somewhere in the range of 5 to 6 hours for most people, and a meaningful amount can still be in your system many hours after the last cup. It doesn't always stop you from falling asleep. What it does is lighten your sleep and trim your deep stages without you noticing, because you slept the whole night and felt mostly fine. The afternoon coffee you don't think twice about can be costing you delta waves you never knew you were supposed to have. Then there's heat. The body initiates deep sleep, partly by dropping its core temperature, and a room that's too warm interferes with that drop, pushing back or thinning out the slow wave stage. Late bright light does its own version of the same thing by delaying the timing of the whole system. And inconsistent sleep timing, going down at very different hours from one night to the next, keeps your body from ever reliably anchoring that first deep block where it belongs. I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to oversell this and turn one stage of sleep into a miracle. It isn't. You still have to eat the surplus, and you still have to train hard, and no amount of perfect sleep builds muscle out of an empty plate. What deep sleep does is govern how much of the work you already did actually lands. It's a multiplier on effort, not a substitute for it. A great night of sleep on top of a lazy week is still a lazy week. The point is narrower, and I'd argue more useful than a miracle would be. If you're already doing the hard parts, this is the part you're probably leaving unmanaged, and it's cheap to fix. There's a second cost worth naming, because it isn't only growth hormone that suffers. Testosterone takes a hit from short sleep too. In healthy young men, restricting sleep to around 5 hours a night for a single week has been shown to lower daytime testosterone by something on the order of 10 to 15%, which is the kind of drop that would normally take a decade of aging to produce. You don't feel it as a number. You feel it as slightly worse recovery, slightly worse training drive, a bulk that's grinding instead of climbing, and you blame the program. Sometimes the program is fine, and the sleep is quietly draining the tank from underneath it. If you'd rather not engineer all this by hand, the Lean Bulk Blueprint does it for you. Every deep sleep lever built straight into your training and macros, ready to start tonight at the link in the description. So if the early deep stage is doing this much, the obvious move is to stop treating it as something that just happens to you, and start treating it as something you set up on purpose. That's the stacking part, not one trick. A set of small, boring conditions that layered together make a deep, intact first cycle far more likely than not. The first lever is temperature. A cooler room, cool enough that you'd want a blanket, supports the core temperature drop that deep sleep depends on, which is why a genuinely cold bedroom tends to deepen sleep more than almost anything else you can change. The second lever is timing. Going to bed and waking up at close to the same hours every day, including weekends, lets your body anchor that first deep block instead of guessing at it. The third is what you keep out of the hours before bed. Alcohol off the table on training days at minimum, the last real dose of caffeine pulled back into the early afternoon, and the bright overhead light traded for something dimmer as the night winds down. That last sentence held the only list I'll give you, and even those three things are really one idea, which is that the hour before sleep should subtract stimulation rather than add it. Light late food that sits heavy, an argument over text, a final scroll that wakes the mind back up. Each of those nudges the first deep cycle later or thinner. The lifter who protects that hour isn't being precious about sleep hygiene. They're protecting the pulse. There are smaller additions people stack on top once the basics are in place. Morning light, getting real outdoor brightness into your eyes early, helps set the clock so that the deep stage lands earlier and cleaner at night, which is a strange thing to absorb, that something you do at 7 in the morning changes the quality of the sleep you get 16 hours later. Some people find a small amount of glycine before bed gentles them into sleep faster. Some find that getting most of their carbohydrate earlier and not lying down stuffed helps. These are refinements. They matter at the margins. And margins are the whole game once you've been bulking long enough that the easy gains are behind you. That's really the reframe this whole topic asks for. Most lifters picture muscle being built in the moment of effort, the rep, the meal, the visible work. The body doesn't agree. The meal is a deposit, and the training session is a deposit, and deep sleep is the night the account actually settles, when the growth hormone fires and the borrowed energy gets turned into tissue. You can make deposits all year and still come up short if the settlement keeps getting interrupted. Most people will never test this, because deep sleep is invisible. You can't see a blunted growth hormone pulse the way you can see a missed workout or a skipped meal, so it never makes the list of things you fixed. The lifters who do test it tend to describe the same thing, which is not a sudden transformation, but the sense that the same effort finally started to count for what it should have all along. So before your next bulking phase quietly underdelivers, grab the Lean Bulk Blueprint from the description, and let's make all this effort finally count. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.